My match day routine is pretty similar week after week. The alarm wakes me up sometimes at 5:30 a.m. like it did on Saturday. I get that immediate jolt of adrenaline, excitement, anticipation for the game time buildup, and then they show that spectacular drone footage hovering over Villa Park, and I wonder how glorious it must be to be able to experience that in person week after week. And then sometimes you get games like Southampton, and sometimes you get games like today. And so I'm pairing this show with the Ron Burgundy Special Edition Blended Scotch Whiskey. I love Scotch, Scotchy, Scotch, Scotch. And believe me, I'm going to have to watch Anchorman or Talladega Nights or Step Brothers to help me forget Aston Villa 0, Arsenal 1. Greetings to you from the parlor. Do you know the one thing that really distinguishes English football and football from any other sport in the world, especially here in North America? It's the concentration of away supporters in the stadiums. I would find it, I think, very difficult to have away support giving it to you in your own manner when they win or are leading. I think I would have some challenges with that, even though it fascinates me greatly. And I've only been an away supporter once in somebody else's ground, and that was here in Canada. There's nowhere near the level of animosity, banter, that historical context, which would be a real challenge, I believe, from a rage management standpoint. Now, before I even get into the Arsenal game, I kind of want to go back to last week and the 1-0 goal against West Ham, because I think I was being a little bit harsh on Matt Cash. And so I want to clear my conscience, because it was a great ball by Dawson across to Said Benrahma. And his first touch is sublime, because if that first touch is not sublime, Matt Cash goes in there and wins that challenge. He's now got a decision to make, because along comes the overlap. Do I stay with the ball or do I take the runner? So in fairness to Matt Cash, he's overloaded. He's in a damned if I do, damned if I don't situation. And that's where I think I was being a bit harsh. Now he decides to go with the overlapping ball, and here come the support from the midfield. There's John McGinn, there's Douglas Luiz, and this is Leon Bailey. And Jacob Ramsey, out of your picture, is also making a beeline for the play. And then there's the part that really irritated Steven Gerrard, the central defenders, because they are not really occupying the man who's going to score the goal. There's Callum Chambers, there's Tyrone Mings, there's Yarmolenko. None of those two players are tight enough. It's not always one single mistake that leads to a goal. It's a accumulation of several problems, and you've already seen two of them. There's Matt Cash taking the runner, no midfielders anywhere close to the ball, and Benrahma, the two defenders standing off. Jacob Ramsey comes in late, but despite that, and take nothing away from the finish, he's able to turn and fire at goal, and that's why I wanted to look back at it, because it's not just down to Matt Cash taking the overlapping run. Right, now that I have that off my mind, and by the way, look at this photo from lovely Louise in the Upper Trinity at Lulu2109, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitter. It's the Holy Trinity, the three big issues or moments that define Villa 0, Arsenal 1, starting with the key statistics and another glorious photo from the Holt End. And a viewership warning, some of the numbers in this slide may not be suitable for our younger viewers. They are that graphic. Aston Villa did not have a touch in the opposing penalty area for the first 30 minutes. Their XG at halftime was 0. The last time that happened in the Premier League was Villa at Arsenal at the Emirates in the first half. Danny Ings accounted for 0.20 of those second half expected goals when he shaped up in the penalty area but couldn't get the shot away. Accurate long balls, 14 completed for 36%. We'll get to that a little bit later. Ollie Watkins lost 5 duels all by himself. That's more than any other player on the park. And this was the first time that we saw the shots not hitting the target. I was surprised there were even 6, quite frankly. Honorable mention, and I hate moaning about refereeing when you're on the wrong end of the score, but could you find two more polar opposite approaches to refereeing than last week by Jared Gillett at West Ham and this week by Andrew Madley against Arsenal? I mean, my goodness, this is a man's game played by men. And Mr. Gillett said, if there's soft contact, I'm letting play continue and so the game flows, and if you take a dive or go down easily, you're risking being caught on the counter. And in this particular game, Mr. Madley said, if you even breathe on Arsenal's two young guns, Saka and Smith-Rowe, I'm calling a foul and maybe even giving a yellow card. And listen, I'm going to freely admit, I really admire and respect those two players. I mean, if you're an England fan right now, the future looks bright. And I really wanted Villa to poach Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal last summer. But in this game, oh my goodness, it's as if they took advanced studies at the Alexandre Lacazette School of the Dark Arts, because he's the best in the league at them, and also at lobbying referees to try to get players sent off, which is a bit douchey because they go down so easily and almost all the decisions went in their favor. This is the foul that preceded the goal. If this was last week, Jared Gillett would have said, play on, and Saka would have had to have learned that he's not getting those decisions. Then there was the yellow card on Tyrone Mings. I'm sorry, this is not a yellow card, and Jim Beglin was the pundit on my feed, and he fully agreed. And now Tyrone Mings needs to change how he approaches the game. And I could say the same thing about a yellow given to Jacob Ramsey a little bit earlier. It's his first foul of the game, and I'm sorry, it's not a yellow card. And a little later, Saka commits a very similar kind of challenge on Ramsey, not given. Arsenal break away and Villa need a big block, otherwise it's attempt on target, and this speaks to the wide disparity in refereeing standards in this league. And I've said it numerous times on this show, the standard of play and the speed of play in the English Premier League is not matched by its referees. Honorable mention is the save Emi Martinez makes in the 10th minute from the deflection off Ezri Konsa. I mean, we have a world-class goalkeeper who somehow digs this one out. It's behind him, for goodness sake. And I don't know if you happen to catch AVTV this week. You get your membership, because it showed the behind-the-scenes work that Big Cuts Neil Cutler does with his goalkeeper. And my goodness, this is awful, pride-swallowing, hard work. The up and the down stuff, the repetition over and over again. It is awful, but this is a day in the life of the goalkeeper. And this is the reason why Emi Martinez makes saves like he did. I really felt sorry for Emi Martinez in this one, especially on the goal, because he sees it so late. He's having to look through 4 sets of legs practically, and he still gets a little hand on it. And this is his derby. He always wants to show Mikel Arteta, Arsenal, the supporters, they didn't value him and they didn't give him a fair opportunity. And you could really sense that in the tunnel before the teams came out. He blanked Bernd Leno, did not even look over. And normally you see sometimes in the tunnel before coming out, the goalkeepers exchange pleasantries. Nuh-uh, not this time. Honorable mention, this is the first time since joining that Phil Coutinho looked merely mortal. And you know Mikel Arteta would have spent a lot of time focusing on Coutinho because he's arguably Aston Villa's biggest threat. Now, last week at West Ham, he was able to have the ball and he had a 96% pass completion percentage from 67 passes because they were okay letting him have the ball. They were shutting down the options for him in dangerous areas. This time, he wasn't getting the ball in the first place, and when he did, he was hurried, he was harassed, and it wasn't just that he didn't have a lot of time, he was just kind of off it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but was it a really breezy day at Villa Park? Because Arsenal wins the toss and decides to attack the north stand in the first half. You always take the wind at your back if you have that choice. Emi Martinez played one straight up in the air in the first half to stop dead. Arsenal kept the ball on the floor tight and tidy for the most part. Then they would pen Aston Villa in and at times force them into a long ball. And when you're playing a long ball on a day like that, you're basically doing that and hoping for the best. And I showed you the Ollie Watkins dual stat earlier. Well, that's kind of a reflection of where Villa were at. All of them struggled at times retaining the ball, especially the long ones. Number 3 was the fight or lack thereof. This is an Arsenal side that came into this game having played 3 times in 6 days. That is extremely challenging, both physically and mentally, and Mikel Arteta had a right moan about it because it was also an early kickoff, and then he got criticized by other managers like Antonio Conte. But if ever there was a side that came into Villa Park that you needed to get after from the start, this was it. They did it against Southampton, who had played in midweek. Physically, in their face, they knew they were in for a fight from the beginning. Not this time. They stood off. They were passive. They allowed Arsenal to play the ball around, get confidence, get continuity, and they never got it back. Now, the referee might have never allowed for Villa to play that kind of game, let's be honest, as I alluded to. But take away the tactics and the approach, which I'll talk about in just a moment. If you aren't up for the fight, systems and tactics don't matter anyway. Big issue or moment number 2, the goal. And as I said earlier, with regards to the 1-0 goal at West Ham, it's never just one thing usually that leads to a goal allowed. And I showed you the so-called foul that led to the set piece, but straight from that set piece, Villa were overloaded. It was quite obvious. And so a 2v1 there turns into an uncontested cross into the penalty area, and nobody deals with anything after that point. They don't win that header. And then Saka, maybe the most dangerous player in the penalty area, is allowed to just drift into a little pocket with nobody anywhere near him. And with 4 Villa players all clustered together, Emi Martinez is unsighted. It's not even the best contact. And there's your 1-0 goal, game winner. And as always happens with Aston Villa, when they concede first, it's usually fatal. And the number 1 big issue or moment that defined Villa 0, Arsenal 1 was the game plan, the approach. Now, the way I've read it is that Michael Beale, Steven Gerrard's right-hand man, is responsible for scouting the opponent, compiling the video work, devising a game plan, and then incorporating those issues into the training sessions, which then will provide the players with a coherent plan going into the weekend. And of course, Steven Gerrard does have to sign off on that. But at this point, it's all theory. It's all X's and O's. It's almost fantasy until you actually get to the weekend. And one thing that I've always been fascinated by is how much time you should spend on your opponent every week. Is it 20% to 80% on yourself? Is it more? Is it less? I mean, Sir Alex always said, let them figure us out, right? We don't worry about them. And the more instruction you give and the more adjustments you make week upon week, the more players have to think rather than just playing freely. By switching from 2 number 9s back to 2 number 10s, I thought Villa played right into Arsenal's hands by, out of possession, being very narrow and surrendering the wide areas, which is where Saka and Smith-Rowe kind of like to operate, not to mention the fullbacks. Then you have the 2 6s in Partey and Saka, who would have been more than happy to have Buendia and Coutinho narrow, leaving Ollie Watkins completely isolated against sometimes 2 centre-backs, sometimes 4 defenders. I think personally Coutinho on a good day could have handled those 2 6s very easily. Both are known for a rash challenge. They were both booked in this game, but he's good enough to deal with those 2. He just needs wide support, and he didn't get that from Buendia or Watkins, or the fullbacks kind of missed Luka Dean in that regard. Now, maybe the slight muscle issue that Danny Ings had, or the spark that Emi Buendia brought into the West Ham game last week, forced Steven Gerrard's hand a little bit. But where he and his staff are going to grow, and they're going to grow, I'm telling you right now, because that's how they're wired. Steven Gerrard didn't become a great player because he sat back and went, well, I know everything. He is wired differently, and he's obsessed. So they will learn that when you have a theory and you employ it and it doesn't work, you need to make adjustments quicker. You need to be able to identify it right away, which is hard to do from field level. And I know they probably have somebody upstairs relaying information down to them. But in this particular case, it felt like Villa were waiting too long, or they didn't recognize the problem in the first place. And I guarantee you, this is where Steven Gerrard and his staff will evolve. And just lastly, on the game plan, it doesn't matter what system you play or what philosophies you have, formation, all that. If you can't string 2 or 3 or 4 passes together or have a reasonably good first touch now and again, which Aston Villa simply did not have on Saturday, Arsenal did. And there's a confidence and now a continuity to how they play. And I think Steven Gerrard and his staff should look over and say, that's the model. That's what we're trying to be. I predict a mass exodus from Villa Park in this offseason, and I think that will coincide with the arrival of 2 or 3 elite players, hopefully a couple that are battle-hardened winners. And I also see the promotion of some of our high-potential youth, because I think there are some in our group that are ready, and that will add a little bit of effervescence and athleticism to this side. This is the hardest part coming up right now. It's one thing to stabilize in the Premier League. It's another thing to take that next step where you become consistently good and in that top 6 group. And more ghastly viewing from the categories we've been following all season long, including the record at Villa Park, which now drops to 18 out of a possible 42 points. It was a set-piece goal, so Austin McPhee's record now 9-9, 0 on the season. The top 6, though, 3 out of 24 points. The only win coming at Old Trafford. When they drew Manchester United at home, United weren't even a top 6 side. And now it's a 2-week wait in the international window. And then Wolves, who just got villaed by Leeds, who pulled a Wolves by turning a 2-goal deficit into a 3-2 win. And Steven Gerrard will have looked at Wolves in the table and said, that's a team we need to reel in before the end of the season. Let's hope everybody returns from international duty and from the break healthy and without injuries. Same as you, of course. And until then, and as always, up the mighty Villa.